Emily Parker tugged her threadbare coat tighter around her as she sat on a cold park bench, the wind biting at her skin. The bustling streets of New York City surrounded her, but she felt isolated from the world. The bright lights and glamorous storefronts were a stark contrast to the harsh realities she now faced. It had been 2 years since her husband, David, passed away unexpectedly, leaving her and their 7-year-old daughter, Lily, to fend for themselves. Without steady income, their lives spiraled quickly, forcing them from their apartment and into shelters, parks, and the margins of society. Lily, her light brown hair blowing in the breeze, leaned against her mother. "I'm hungry, Mommy," she whispered, her small voice breaking Emily's heart. Emily forced a smile, masking her own hunger and despair. "I know, sweetheart. We'll find something soon." As they stood up to leave, Emily scanned the streets, searching for any opportunity. An open cafe, a kind passerby, anything that might offer a meal. But just as they turned toward the subway entrance to seek warmth for the night, Emily noticed something unusual out of the corner of her eye. A well-dressed man stumbled out of a sleek black car, clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain. He staggered toward a high-end restaurant, but collapsed just a few feet from the door. Without a second thought, Emily rushed toward him. She may have been struggling, but her instinct to help others had never left her. Kneeling beside the man, she quickly assessed the situation. His breathing was shallow, his pulse faint, and he was fading fast. Emily had taken a CPR class years ago, never thinking she'd need to use it in such a dire situation. But here she was, in the middle of a sidewalk, surrounded by wealthy strangers who didn't know what to do. "Call 911. Emily shouted to a nearby crowd of onlookers who had begun to gather. One woman fumbled for her phone, but Emily didn't wait. She began chest compressions, her hands pressing rhythmically into the man's chest, hoping with all her might that she wasn't too late. After what felt like an eternity, the man's chest rose with a sudden intake of breath. His eyes fluttered open, confusion and pain written across his face. Just as Emily exhaled in relief, sirens wailed in the distance. The paramedics arrived swiftly, taking over and rushing the man to the hospital. As they loaded him into the ambulance, he locked eyes with Emily, his gratitude clear even though he could barely speak. She watched as the vehicle sped away, leaving her standing on the cold sidewalk, wondering what had just happened. The crowd dispersed as quickly as it had gathered, the world moving on from the dramatic moment as though it had never occurred. Emily looked down at her trembling hands, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Lily tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, is the man going to be okay?" "I hope so, sweetie," Emily murmured, pulling Lily close and kissing the top of her head. She wasn't sure what to make of what had just happened. One moment she was lost in her own struggles, and the next she had saved a man's life. It felt surreal, like she had stepped into someone else's story for a brief moment. But reality snapped back into place as her stomach growled, reminding her of their own pressing needs. They continued walking, the cold wind pushing them toward the shelter. Emily did her best to push the incident out of her mind, focusing instead on the immediate concerns of keeping Lily safe and warm. But fate had something else in store for her. The next day, Emily and Lily wandered the streets again, the city as unforgiving as ever. As they made their way to a public library where they could spend the day out of the cold, a sleek black car pulled up beside them. Emily's heart skipped a beat, recognizing it from the night before. The window rolled down, revealing a man she hadn't expected to see again. It was the same man she had saved. He smiled weakly, still recovering from the ordeal but very much alive. "You're the woman who saved me last night," he said, his voice full of appreciation. Emily nodded, unsure of what to say. "I'm glad you're okay." "I owe you my life," he replied. "My name is Robert Harris. Most people call me Rob." He paused for a moment, studying Emily and then glancing at Lily, who was half hiding behind her mother. "I've been looking for you all morning." "Why?" Emily asked cautiously. People like him didn't normally mix with people like her. I need to repay you, Rob said, his tone serious. You saved my life. That's no small thing. Emily shook her head. You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would do. Rob gave a short laugh. You'd be surprised. Not many people would have acted as quickly as you did. Look, I don't know what your situation is, but I'm a man of my word. Let me help you. Do you have a place to stay? Something to eat? Emily hesitated. Pride and fear of the unknown held her back, but the thought of Lily going hungry was too much to bear. We've had a rough time, she admitted quietly. Rob nodded, seeming to understand more than he let on. I own a few restaurants in the city. There's one in particular that's struggling. An old place that needs new life. It's a bit out of the way, but I think it might be a good fit for someone like you. How would you like to run it? Emily blinked in disbelief. Run it? I don't know anything about running a restaurant. But you know about food, right? And I have a feeling you're someone who knows how to work hard. Rob's eyes sparkled with determination. I'm offering you a chance. You don't have to say yes, but I think you might be just the person to turn this place around. Emily stared at him, stunned. Was this real? Could she actually take such a leap after everything that had happened? A million doubts swirled in her mind, but when she looked down at Lily's hopeful face, something inside her shifted. I'll think about it, she said cautiously, though her heart already leaned toward yes. Rob handed her a business card with the address of the restaurant and his personal contact information. Take your time, but don't wait too long. This might be the fresh start you need. As Rob's car pulled away, Emily stood there, the weight of his offer settling in. A restaurant. Her own chance to rebuild, to give Lily the life she deserved. It was terrifying, but it was also the first real opportunity she'd had in a long time. Emily grasped Lily's hand tightly as they walked toward the shelter. Mommy, Lily whispered, do you think we can really have our own restaurant? Emily looked down at her daughter's bright, innocent eyes and smiled for the first time in what felt like years. Maybe, sweetie, maybe. The winds of change had arrived, and Emily could feel a new chapter of her life beginning. Emily Parker stood in front of the building that would soon become her world. The sweet spot. The weathered sign above the door creaked in the breeze. The paint chipped and faded from years of neglect. The restaurant stood on a quiet street corner, far from the bustle of Manhattan's prime real estate. With its grimy windows and cracked brickwork, it looked anything but sweet. Emily's heart sank a little as she glanced at Lily beside her, her daughter's face full of innocent wonder. This is it, huh? Emily murmured under her breath. Rob's words from earlier echoed in her mind. It needs new life, but I think you might be just a person to turn it around. Looking at the building now, she wondered if even the most experienced restaurateur could breathe life into such a place. But she had no choice. This was her shot. Her chance to escape the spiral of homelessness, to give Lily a future. She took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The interior wasn't much better. The dining area was dim, with mismatched chairs and tables scattered around in no particular order. The walls were faded and stained, a distant memory of whatever color they once had been. A musty smell hung in the air, and the floorboards creaked under Emily's footsteps. The kitchen, visible through a swinging door at the back, wasn't much more promising. A few old ovens lined the walls, and the countertops were chipped and worn. Dust covered everything. Emily sighed and put her hands on her hips, surveying the scene. Well, it's not a palace, but it's ours for now, she said, trying to stay positive for Lily's sake. We'll make it work. Lily, who had been quietly taking everything in, turned to her mother with wide eyes. Are we going to live here? Emily smiled softly. No, sweetheart. We're going to make food here. Delicious food. Pastries, cakes, and everything we can imagine, but it'll take some time. Her mind raced as she imagined what she could do with the place. She pictured bright walls, happy customers, and the smell of freshly baked goods filling the air. The dream was so clear in her head, but the reality in front of her was daunting. Emily's phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Rob Harris, checking in on her first day. She stared at the screen for a moment before typing a quick reply. "I'm here. It's a lot of work, but thank you for the opportunity. I'll do my best." The next morning, Emily arrived early at the sweet spot, determined to dive into the transformation. She had no budget for renovations, so every improvement would have to come from her own sweat and creativity. She started by cleaning, scrubbing the walls, mopping the floors, and clearing the dust from the neglected kitchen. Lily helped where she could, singing quietly to herself as she wiped down tables. But cleaning was just the beginning. Emily knew she needed a way to attract customers, something to draw people to this forgotten corner of the city. She had no experience running a restaurant, but she knew one thing. Food had to come from the heart. She wanted the menu to reflect who she was, the warmth she found in baking, and the love she felt for her daughter. For weeks, Emily worked late into the night, experimenting with recipes. She crafted pastries that reminded her of the ones she used to bake with her mother, warm, comforting treats that felt like home. There were cinnamon rolls, gooey and soft with just the right amount of spice. Apple tarts with buttery, flaky crusts and fillings that ooze with caramel. She created lemon bars so tangy and bright, they could bring a smile to anyone's face. Each pastry became a reflection of her journey. Sweetness mixed with hardship, but always hopeful. Lily, her unofficial taste tester, sat perched on the counter each evening, taking small bites of everything her mother baked. "This one's the best," she would say, her face lighting up with every bite. "No, wait, this one is." Emily would laugh, grateful for Lily's enthusiasm. In those quiet moments, the world outside faded, and it felt like they were back in the kitchen of their old home, long before everything fell apart. But creating the perfect pastries was just one part of the equation. Emily had to figure out how to keep the sweet spot afloat financially. She had very little money left, and hiring staff was out of the question. She would have to do everything herself: cooking, cleaning, managing inventory, and taking care of Lily. It was an overwhelming thought, but Emily wasn't one to back down from a challenge. She had come too far to quit now. On opening day, the sweet spot looked far from perfect, but it was clean and welcoming. The walls were still in need of paint, and the furniture wasn't exactly stylish, but Emily had added small touches. A vase of fresh flowers on each table, handwritten chalkboard menus, and a display case filled with her pastries. She hoped that these small details would make up for the restaurant's rough edges. Lily had insisted on being there for the grand opening, her excitement contagious. "What if lots of people come, Mommy?" she asked, bouncing on her toes as she watched Emily prepare. Emily smiled and knelt beside her daughter. "That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? But even if it's just a few people, we'll still give them our best." By noon, the doors were open, and Emily waited nervously behind the counter. She watched the street outside, hoping for customers. But the hours ticked by with only a handful of people wandering in, most of them neighborhood locals curious about the new place. Emily put on a brave face, offering her warmest smiles and sending customers away with complimentary treats when they didn't order anything. As the day dragged on, disappointment began to weigh heavy on Emily's shoulders. She had hoped for a better turnout. The rent was looming, and without more customers, she feared she'd be back where she started, struggling to make ends meet. That night, after closing up, Emily sat in the dimly lit restaurant with Lily curled up asleep in one of the chairs. She stared at the empty tables, the uneaten pastries in the display case, and wondered if she had made a mistake. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this. Maybe she had been foolish to think she could take on such a huge responsibility when her own life was already so chaotic. As Emily cleaned the counter, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Rob again. How was the first day? She hesitated before responding. She didn't want to admit how tough it had been. It was quiet. She typed back, "But I'm not giving up. I'm just getting started." Emily put down her phone and looked around the restaurant one more time. It was a humble beginning, but she reminded herself that even the sweetest success often comes from the hardest struggles. Tomorrow would be a new day. She would try again, and in that quiet moment, Emily made a promise to herself. No matter how hard it got, she would find a way to turn the sweet spot into something special, not just for her, but for Lily and for everyone who needed a little bit of sweetness in their lives. It was a crisp autumn morning, and Emily stood behind the counter at the sweet spot, dusting flour off her hands as she prepared the day's pastries. Business had been slow, far slower than she had hoped. Despite her best efforts, the cozy restaurant on a quiet street corner was barely drawing in any customers. Every morning she arrived full of hope, and every evening she left with trays of unsold pastries, her optimism fading. She was lost in thought when the jingle of the doorbell startled her. A woman entered, wearing a scarf and a camera bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes swept over the cafe, lingering on the chalkboard menu and the pastry display case. "Good morning," the woman said with a smile. "Mind if I sit down?" "Of course, welcome," Emily replied, grateful for the company. "What can I get for you?" The woman studied the menu. "What's your specialty?" Emily hesitated, glancing at the pastries behind the glass. "The apple tart is my personal favorite, but the cinnamon rolls are fresh out of the oven if you prefer something classic." "I'll go with the apple tart then." "And a coffee," the woman said, taking a seat near the window. As Emily prepared the order, she tried to tamp down the familiar nervousness. She needed every customer to leave satisfied, hoping this one might return. The woman took a bite of the apple tart, and her eyes widened in delight. "This is amazing," she said, taking another bite. "I'm Kate, by the way. I run a food blog called City Bites, and this might be the best apple tart I've had." Emily's breath caught. "A food blog? That's incredible." Kate smiled. "Your pastries deserve attention. I'll feature the sweet spot in my next post. May I take some photos?" Emily could hardly believe her luck. "Please feel free." She watched as Kate snapped photos of the tart, the pastries, and the warm interior. "Thank you so much. This could really help." Kate nodded. Good food speaks for itself. People will come. The next morning, Emily woke up to a flood of notifications on her phone. Kate's blog post had gone live, and the response was overwhelming. The review painted the sweet spot as a hidden gem, where the apple tart is a revelation and the love behind each pastry is palpable. By mid-morning, customers began pouring in, one by one. They filled the once-empty tables, eager to taste the treats they had read about. Emily could hardly keep up, the orders piling in as word spread. By noon, the cafe was packed, every seat taken and the display case quickly emptying. Lily, watching from the kitchen, beamed at her mother. "Mommy, look at all the people." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with joy and disbelief. The restaurant buzzed with energy, filled with the chatter of happy customers. The aroma of cinnamon rolls and lemon bars filled the air, and for the first time, Emily felt the weight of her struggles begin to lift. As the day came to an end and the last few customers trickled out, Emily finally had a moment to breathe. She sat down, exhausted but exhilarated, glancing around the now empty cafe that had been so full just hours before. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Rob. "Looks like things are finally turning around. I knew you could do it." Emily smiled, her eyes scanning the cafe as she replied, "We had our best day yet. Thank you for everything." Locking up for the night, Emily whispered to herself, "We're just getting started." For the first time in a long while, she truly believed it. Just when things seemed to be on the upswing for Emily and her newly established bakery, the sweet spot, an unexpected storm brews on the horizon. Out of the blue, Emily's estranged sister, Sarah, arrives unannounced, shattering the fragile peace Emily has managed to cultivate in her life. After years of silence since their parents' untimely death, the reemergence of Sarah brings with it a wave of unresolved grief and tension that had long lingered beneath the surface. Sarah steps through the door with a determined look in her eyes, and it's not long before she unleashes a torrent of accusations. She claims that Emily has wrongfully taken an inheritance their parents supposedly left behind, igniting a fierce argument that quickly devolves into a painful exchange of accusations and buried resentments. Emily, caught off guard by the harshness of Sarah's words, feels her heart sink. The bond they once shared feels more like a distant memory. The fear of losing what little family connection remains is compounded by the bitterness of the past. As the conversation spirals, Emily grapples with the flood of emotions that come rushing back. The guilt and grief of the tragic car accident that forever altered their lives. Neither sister has fully confronted the loss of their parents, and now the unresolved trauma threatens to overwhelm them both. The weight of their collective experiences hangs in the air, heavy and suffocating, making it difficult for either woman to catch her breath. With tensions flaring, Sarah raises the stakes, threatening to take legal action over the inheritance dispute. This threat sends a shiver down Emily's spine, further complicating her already delicate situation as she navigates the early days of her burgeoning business. The elation she felt while establishing the sweet spot begins to dim, replaced by anxiety and uncertainty. Emily's joy is eclipsed by the specter of family drama, casting a shadow over her newfound success. As the sisters clash, the once warm and inviting atmosphere of the bakery feels tainted by their animosity. Customers who once filled the shop with laughter and compliments now appear as mere witnesses to the unraveling of a family. Emily is torn between her desire to defend herself and her longing to heal the fractured bond with the sister she once adored. As the whirlwind of accusations and hurt threatens to consume them both, Emily must confront not only the reality of their broken relationship, but also the deep-seated pain that has kept them apart for so long. In this tumultuous time, Emily is pushed to reflect on what family truly means and how far she is willing to go to mend the rifts that have caused so much sorrow. Will she find a way to reconcile with Sarah, or will the shadows of their past continue to dictate their future? As tensions rise and decisions loom, Emily stands at a crossroads, faced with the daunting challenge of navigating her personal heartbreak amid the sweetness of her dreams. The atmosphere at the sweet spot was heavy, a palpable tension hanging in the air as employees darted glances between Emily and Sarah. Whenever their eyes met, there was a flash of something, pain, anger, confusion, before each looked away, as if fearing the weight of the other's gaze would fracture the delicate veneer they each had constructed around their hearts. Rob, who had been quietly observing the unfolding drama from a distance, finally decided he could no longer stand idly by. He was not just the head chef of the sweet spot. He was also the glue that held many of its staff together, a silent protector of dreams and aspirations. With a determined stride, he approached the sisters, who stood frozen in their own turmoil. "Emily, can we talk?" Rob asked, gesturing toward the back office where a small round table sat amid a scattering of flour and baking tools. At that moment, he sensed that Sarah, feeling the weight of her own guilt, needed to be included in the discussion. "Sarah, you too. We need to clear the air." Once inside, the door clicked shut, sealing the chaos of the restaurant away for a brief moment. Emily crossed her arms, her expression a mix of hope and skepticism. Meanwhile, Sarah fidgeted with her sleeves, avoiding eye contact as if the truth could be found at the tips of her fingers. "I've been watching both of you," Rob began, his voice steady but imbued with warmth. "You're both carrying so much more than just this conflict. Let's unpack this, shall we?" Emily's eyes flickered with doubt. "What's there to unpack? Sarah thinks I'm hiding money from her." Rob shook his head. "That's not what this is really about, is it? Sarah, you've been awfully angry. What's really going on?" Sarah hesitated, her gaze finally meeting Rob's. I feel abandoned," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "When we lost Mom, I thought we were supposed to take care of each other. But then I felt like Emily found a way out through this restaurant, and I was still stuck." The room fell silent, the weight of her confession hanging heavy. Emily's heart raced as Sarah's words struck a chord. "I never meant to leave you behind, Sarah. I just wanted to survive," she replied, her voice breaking. "I thought about you every moment, but I didn't know how to help you." Rob watched as the two sisters began to crack open a window through which their grief could escape. "You're not alone in this." He took a deep breath, feeling the memories of his own past surge forward, unearthing vulnerabilities he rarely discussed. Years ago, I was homeless too, just like you, Emily. I struggled, and I felt like no one would ever see me beneath the dirt and despair. It was a small restaurant that took a chance on me. It's how I got my start. Sarah's eyes widened. But you're Rob. You've built something amazing. Rob smiled softly, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. It didn't happen overnight. I had to unpack my own anger and grief. I had to face the truth about my past to create the future I wanted. I tried to control everything, just like I see you both doing. But look where pushing each other away has brought you. Tears brimmed in Emily's eyes as she absorbed Rob's words. I thought I was protecting you by keeping my successes apart from you, and I thought I could run from the pain by resenting you, Sarah interjected, her voice trembling. Both sisters looked at each other then, recognition dawning as they looked beyond their anger into the shared scars that had formed their strengths and vulnerabilities. I can't keep pretending that I haven't felt lost too, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. I need your help to find my way back, Em. Emily's heart ached at the sight of her sister unguarded, stripped of the bravado she clung to. Maybe we can help each other. In a moment charged with newfound understanding, Sarah took a deep breath, the weight of her frustrations lightening. What if I helped you run the restaurant? I may not know much about baking yet, but I can manage things, set up schedules, whatever you need. You need someone you can trust, and I want to be there for you. Emily stared at her sister, hope blooming in her chest. Really? You do that? Absolutely, Sarah replied, the resolve in her voice as strong as the pulse of the bakery around them. We can build something together, something stronger than what either of us could achieve alone. Rob, watching the excited glimmer in their eyes, let a smile break through. That's the spirit. You both have unique skills that complement one another. Imagine how the sweet spot could thrive with both of your strengths combined. From the corner of the office, a sunbeam snuck through the window, illuminating the dust particles swirling in the air, a perfect reminder of how light could break through even the darkest places. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt a flicker of true optimism. Let's move forward. Together, Emily said, extending her hand towards Sarah, who met her halfway, their palms clasping firmly. Together, Sarah echoed, her eyes shimmering with determination. As Rob stepped back, he felt a sense of satisfaction, but also a glimmer of hope for his own journey, a circle of healing that he had cultivated as he helped mend these two broken spirits. He knew the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but with the sisters united and willing to face their grief rather than hide from it, the sweet spot was bound to rise, not just as a bakery, but as a sanctuary for all who stepped through its doors. As the seasons changed, the sweet spot transformed from a mere bakery into a thriving cultural cornerstone of the community. The air within the restaurant buzzed with laughter and chatter, creating a welcoming atmosphere that enveloped everyone who walked through its doors. The walls, once bare and worn, now showcased local artists' work, with colorful paintings that adorned the space like sprightly petals blossoming in spring. Emily's pastries had become nothing short of legendary. Her signature vanilla lavender cupcakes and rich chocolate espresso tarts were as much a treat for the eyes as they were for the palate. Customers flocked to the sweet spot, not just to savor the delectable desserts, but also to relish the authenticity that Emily poured into each creation. With every pat of dough and whisk of batter, she infused her soul into the pastries, each bite a testament to her journey from despair to delight. Lily thrived in this bustling environment, her once timid demeanor now vibrant, reflecting the energy of the sweet spot. She often helped her mother in the kitchen, donning a miniature apron and a huge smile. Early mornings saw her carefully arranging pastries in the display case or assisting Emily as she rolled out dough, their laughter mingling with the aromas wafting through the kitchen. The bond they shared deepened, nurtured by the very place that had allowed them to reclaim their lives. One day, as autumn leaves began to blanket the ground, Rob, the former owner, visited the sweet spot again, holding a letter. He had become a well-known figure in the culinary community, advocating for small businesses and supporting struggling chefs. In his letter, he recounted his own tumultuous journey, a poignant reminder of the unexpected turns life can take. He wrote of his early days, a vagabond with little direction, until a compassionate stranger had seen his potential and offered him a lifeline, a job, and a chance to dream. This act of kindness had spurred him to create a life that he was proud of, and now he wanted to pay that generosity forward. "I chose you, Emily," he wrote, "because you embody the spirit of resilience that I once needed. You took the weight of this establishment and made it soar. The Sweet Spot is not just a restaurant. It's a testament to hope and courage, and I know you will continue to inspire others as you have inspired me." Emily read the letter with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by a tide of emotions. It was as if the pieces of her life had clicked into place. She understood that the Sweet Spot was more than just a bakery. It was a haven, a sanctuary of possibility where stories unfolded, friendships blossomed, and lives intersected with love. With Sarah by her side, their friendship a comforting constant, and Lily growing up to be a spirited young girl, who was as spirited as she was kind, Emily embraced her family and community with new vigor. They celebrated their victories, big and small, with each pastry shared, each event hosted, and each customer welcomed. The Sweet Spot had truly become a place of belonging. Now and then, Emily would pause in the midst of her bustling kitchen, a moment's stillness amidst the chaos, and reflect on the path that had led her here. The pain of her past had not vanished, but it had become a shadow that walked beside her now, a reminder that life's challenges could lead to beautiful, unexpected outcomes. She was no longer simply surviving. She was thriving. Emily embraced her role as a creator and a mentor, offering baking classes for young aspiring chefs in the community, sharing her knowledge and passion with those eager to learn. She often told her story, the struggles, the fears, and the triumphs, hoping to inspire others to chase their dreams, just as she had. And with every pastry she baked, Emily filled the Sweet Spot with sweetness that transcended flavor. It was a sweetness born from love, resilience, and the unwavering belief in new beginnings. An embodiment of a life reclaimed, a legacy of hope passed on in the form of warm, delicious treats shared with those around her. She knew that in life, each day was a fresh batch to rise, just waiting to be baked.